Hello and welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. I'm working in this watercolour block again today, the Saunders Waterford hot press. I've already got a sketch done on this block and it's going to be time for the inking now. I started this off as a sketch in one of my sketchbooks. I'll just grab the sketchbook. So it was one of the sketches in this sketchbook here, which is the not Etcher, that's the other sketchbook I'm working in at the moment. It is the Epsilon sketchbook by Stillman and Byrne. There we go. So this is the sketch that I did. And I ended up changing her face a little and the crown a little bit as well, how it rests on her head. And then it's also a mixture of some other sketches that I did here, which I did outside. And I ended up combining that all together to make, I think I'm going to call her the Spring Queen. When I was originally doing the sketch in my sketchbook, I was going for like a sort of star or sun vibe, I think, when I was coming up with like the crown and stuff. But I ended up thinking more about like the coming back of the sun and spring. So we've got some lichen here that's going to be a really, really bright yellowy spring green, and then we've got daffodils up here as well. Once I've done the inking, I'm going to do some colour comps just to decide how I want to have the colours, because this area is going to be pretty yellowy and spring greeny as well, because we're going to have the very yellow and yellow green lichen and then also the yellow and orange daffodils. And then I need to make sure that it's going to work with the character as well. But for the inking, we're going to focus on the inking first. I've got a few different pens here. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to use some Microns because there are quite a lot of really tiny details in this. And I'm probably just going to stick to the pocket brush pen again for this one. And then I've got another Micron just in a different size. So I think that one's 0.25 and then this one's 0.45. And then I've got a felt brush here, which is the Bimoji, just in case I'm not liking just using this brush pen, but we'll see what ends up happening. Like last time I just ended up using these two. And I'll sort out the lighting because we're getting some shadows now. I'll sort out the lighting and then we'll get started on the inking. Greetings, it is voiceover time while I'm inking. I ended up only using the two pens I thought I would use, which is this Micron here, the 0.25, and the Pentel pocket brush pen. And that pretty much worked out for me for the whole thing. And I ended up reaching for this Micron quite a lot, especially for details on the character and especially the jewelry and the hair. I primarily used the Micron for. I loved inking the details on this. It was a lot of fun. And then later in the watercoloring, the layering that I did for the wood on the branch and the lichen, but especially the wood on the branch, I really, really enjoyed and I'm super happy with. But I'll talk a little bit more about the watercoloring when we get to that point. But I went into this with a kind of rough idea in my head. I didn't end up doing colour comps in the more traditional sense. In the end, I mixed up a bunch of different colours and kind of placed them next to each other in loose blobs and figured out roughly what I wanted to do and the colour mixes I want to do, doing that. And that worked out fine for me at this point. Sometimes I just want to get on with the painting, which isn't always the best idea because it's good to have some kind of game plan going in. So at the very least, I try to make sure that I do color blobs, if not color comps, and that worked out for me this time around. I had so much fun inking this. It was a really, really fun piece to ink because there were some really interesting shapes. I've been loving folds in clothes recently and exploring those a little bit more. It's a subject that I'm very much only starting to dip my toes into in sketching and then also in inking illustrations like this. I've been also looking at some resources to help me learn about clothing folds. I'm just trying to think of some of them off the top of my head. Morpho is always a big one for me. I have a few of their books now. I was going to say I have all of their books, and I don't. I have 5 of their books off the top of my head, but I don't have the newer ones that have been released. But one of the Morpho books I have is the Clothing and Folds. I think that's what it's called. Book. And I've been studying that a little bit to try and learn the different kinds of folds and how they appear and when they appear. But of course, that's going to be a long-term process of studying that and then also learning to see that and learning to apply that as well. And I'm trying to make sure that I learn to apply it by focusing on it in my own sketches and illustrations, like the character sketch for the half elf I did in last week's video, and then for this. And I actually did these the other way around. I did this one first, and then I ended up doing the sketch that you saw in last week's video of the half elf. But this one's taken me a little bit longer to edit. It also took me longer to do, obviously, because it's an illustration. I had to do all the sketching and then the inking and then the watercoloring versus doing just some nice sketchbook activities. When it came to the inking, I noticed a few things that I can work on afterwards that I feel like I need to improve at. And that's something that comes up whenever you draw. You always find new things that you can learn from and improve at. So I've made note of them, but I'm gonna time travel you back in time for a moment. This is where the illustration is at so far. I'm done with the inking and I've just been removing the last of the pencil lines with a kneaded eraser, and I've got all of my watercolour supplies out so that I can start figuring out the colour scheme for this. I already have an idea of the colours I'm going to use, but I want to just test out a few different colour comps first in my sketchbook. But the main theme of this, because she's a spring queen, is spring, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to be going with some nice spring greens for this. But then I want to figure out how I want to balance that out with the rest of the elements as well. Hello again. So, as you just saw and heard, I knew that I needed to do some colour comps, at least to understand the colours that I wanted to use. So I did end up going with just blobs of different colours to figure out rough ideas of overall colour scheme and also some of the possible mixes I wanted to use. And from those colour blobs that I did, I figured out a sort of mother colour that I wanted to use for this piece, and it was Azo Green, which is PY129. I'm just going to check that. It is indeed PY129, which is sometimes known as green gold. It kind of differs brand to brand. Some brands have a paint colour called green gold, and it's a convenience mix, or it'll be another pigment. But it's also known as azo green. I can't remember its full chemical name. It's like copper azo something something green, but it's classed as a yellow pigment. It's yellow green, and it's a colour that I mainly use for mixing. I don't often use it on its own. It's very much a mixing colour for me, and I used it as a base to mix a lot of the different elements that you'll see in this. I used it as a base for mixing the greens, obviously, the skin tones and the wood, even some of the yellows and oranges. I had that included as well, especially for the yellows, and also underpainting some of those yellow areas as well. And overall, I learned a lot more about mixing with Azo Green, even though I already use it a fair amount since I added it to my main palette that I use, which I termed my studio travel palette in a video if you want to go see me setting it up. It's on my channel. I think it's almost a year old now, the palette I'm using. And throughout the last year, I've learned a lot about mixing with it, but this really helped me expand even more because I was using it as a mother color for so many different mixes. So one thing that I took away from this was learning a lot more about Azo Green. And another thing was what you're seeing at the moment, which is me painting specifically the bark on wood. And wood textures are something that I really want to improve at because I love the elements of trees, branches, and things in my drawings, but I have never really known how to paint them. So one thing that I've been trying to improve at are my textures in painting. And with this, I really wanted to try and learn how to paint bark, or at least try and start learning how to paint bark. So I was learning from a few different artists by studying how they paint and studying their paintings, one of which is Peter Woolley. He's on YouTube and he shows a lot of his painting processes. He mainly uses watercolor, though sometimes he does show like pen and ink and graphite and things, but he paints trees a lot because he mainly is a landscape artist. So I studied his videos and his process of painting bark and trees and branches and trunks, and tried to understand how he was layering, especially in how he is able to build up his trees without using any opaque colors. He's purely going in with transparent watercolor, and he's making all of these layers and building up the texture. So that was something that I wanted to really explore with this piece, and I'm so glad I did because I enjoyed the process of it so much, and it really clicked with me by doing this painting. I need to work a bit more on the inner wood and how I want to show those textures, and also the shadows in the wood as well. But when it came to the outside, when it came to like the bark, it just felt so good. It just felt like everything was working out, and I've been using that for a painting that I'm currently working on and trying to explore some other types of trees and how I can apply it to a conifer this time around. But I'm really, really happy that I made a big step forward in my painting with that. I felt like it all just clicked and fell into place with that one element. But there's many more elements to go on a never-ending quest to follow what interests me in art. But we take each step at a time with happiness and celebration, because there's a lot of steps, but we made one. Yay. Or something like that. But I apologize because I was 100% convinced that I did record some footage of me painting at least one of the layers of skin that I did, but apparently I didn't, so I apologize profusely for that. I am kicking myself now because I was sure that I had, but I hadn't. And for the skin, since I didn't manage to record it, I'll at least tell you what I did for the skin. I still used the PY129, the Azo Green, mixed with quinacridone Rose and brown red, which I think is PBR25. And those mixed together, and then sometimes dulled down with Indanthrone Blue if I feel like I need to dull it down a bit. If it's getting too warm, then I'll dull it down with Indanthrone Blue. Or if I need to make it more cooler toned with like a cool pink, or try and make it more coral, then I added the quinacridone Rose in, especially for the cheeks and for the blush. And overall, that was how I mixed the skin tones. Like I said, I'm kicking myself that I didn't record at least one bit of me painting the skin. I'll have to try and like write down all the different bits that I'm doing and make sure I try and record at least one thing. But if you're an artist, you know how it goes. When you start painting, you kind of just go, you lose yourself in the flow. Apparently, I lost myself a little bit too much this time. But oh well, we live and learn. I wasn't too sure how I wanted to paint the clothes, like you're seeing me doing at the moment. I decided to settle on what I'm doing here because I felt like it fit in with similar techniques as what I was using in other things in the painting, so it would be a little bit more cohesive. But I feel like one of the takeaways for doing this illustration is that I want to practice painting clothes more as well as drawing them. So learning about the clothing fold still and getting better at that, but then also painting textures in clothes too is something that I really want to take away from this as a topic for further study, I think. And you're just seeing me finish up here. And at this point was when I realized that there was something wrong with this illustration. You might have noticed it already, but if you haven't, let me let you know. I accidentally didn't put in some of her hair behind the wire of her crown, and that white between the top like wire and then the under arch is supposed to have hair behind it. So I ended up going in and fixing that after doing these white marks here. I just inked in some more hair curls and then painted them. Thankfully, I still had the same mix on my palette still. I hadn't cleaned my palette at this point, which is one of the benefits of not cleaning your palette very often. And I ended up just fixing that up real quick so you can see that now. And this is the finished illustration. I learned a lot from this, and I've also learned a lot of areas I still need to improve in. Well, there's constant learning, isn't there? But thank you so much for watching. I'm not sure what videos are going to be coming out next. I've played around with a few ideas that I've been talking about on my Instagram stories, but if there's anything you'd like to see in particular, let me know in the comments. There's always going to be illustrations, sketchbook videos and stuff. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!